All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first talk of the series hosted by our Rubrik product design team. As Dilshad mentioned, my name is Jenny, and I'm a senior user researcher here at Rubrik. Now, recently, I published an article on our design blog about a study that I conducted last year, which was actually the first time that we used a diary study methodology here at Rubrik. And today, I wanted to share some of these techniques with you. Whether you're a user researcher, a designer, a product manager, or any role that's interfacing with users, this can be an instrumental tool for you to uncover user needs and really understand more about who you're serving your product to. So with that, I like to first start off by answering some questions that are probably on the top of your mind when you hear diary study. What exactly is a diary study? When can I use it? How can it be useful for me? And I want to take you back to your childhood days. Maybe when you were younger, you kept a diary or journal of your own, and you probably kept it away from prying eyes because there's a lot of sensitive information you put in there. You probably poured your heart out. You were very honest and vulnerable in writing. And a diary is just that. It's a personal record of yours, and it can reveal a lot about yourself, what you do, when you do it, how you feel about those things. And if you've ever read back your diary entries, you've probably observed how you've changed over time. And in user research, a diary study is just that. It's a personal documentation method, and it can help you track users' behavior over time. It can focus on behaviors, activities, or experiences. And the great thing, just like a diary, it really lets you reach out deeply into your users because they're able to really be honest in what they record. And the great thing is that the scope of a diary study can be as wide or narrow as you want. So for example, maybe you've set up an online business and you're curious about when users are coming to shop. Well, a diary study can help you figure out what those triggers and motivations are. As another example, maybe you're already at an established company, but as a PM, you've been instructed to reach out to a new core market, and it's the elderly, who you don't know anything about. And so here, a diary study can help you pick out representatives from this group and track their behavior over time. And finally, just as a last example, cute photo of a dog here. Let's say you're a dog adoption center and you're curious about a specific process. In this case, what is it like for someone to actually go through that process of adopting a dog? You need to know this in order to figure out how you're going to build your website. Now, those are just some hypothetical examples, but I also want to bring in a real world case study as well, which is the project that I conducted, the customer backup journey. Now, last year, I was approached with this business goal from our product team. They said, well, we know how users are engaging with Rubrik Security Cloud in those initial onboarding days, but after that, how do they actually interact with our product? What are they thinking about when it comes to backups? And being able to address this was critical to our company because we need to know if we were missing the mark in any areas and not addressing critical user needs. To help define the scope here, I realized that we need to focus on our primary persona, which is our backup admin. And specifically, how are they interacting with those backup features that Rubrik provides? After talking with some internal experts, I decided that the themes that we would be focusing on are maintenance, monitoring, reporting, troubleshooting, and optimization. At the end of the project, a set of research questions that we wanted to answer were the following. When do users choose to go into Rubrik Security Cloud? What are users' key tasks when it comes to managing backups? What are the critical moments in their journey? And what challenges do users face? And at the end of this project, we were able to come out with a set of foundational research findings that are continuing to be referenced to this day. Moreover, it also helped generate and encourage empathy for our users across the company. Great, now that you know what a diary study is, you're probably thinking, how do I actually plan one? And planning, as with many research studies, is critical to its success, but even more so with a diary study, because there's quite a few logistics you'll need to consider. Now, this may look like a lot, but I'll take you through step by step each one. And as we go through these, you'll see how you can set yourself up for success. So the first one I want to focus on is the length of a study. So as I mentioned, a diary study is longitudinal, which means that when you're collecting feedback, it's going to take place over days, weeks, or even months. So unlike a usability session or an interview where it's all one sitting, you're going to be collecting feedback from your users over time. So that means you're going to need to think about what your persona is like, and specifically what a cycle typically looks like for them. So in the case of our backup admin case study, we chose 3 weeks here, about 15 work days. And this is because backup admins typically have a daily routine. So this would give me a solid amount of time to determine what that daily routine was. One important thing to consider here, though, is that a longer time commitment may mean it'd be harder to recruit participants. So you'll have to strike a good balance. Next up is participant recruitment. And this is where you'll need to consider who's actually contributing to your diary study. And you'll have to decide on your target persona and how many personas, people that you would like. And here you might want to pick a bigger pool if there's a lot of variation in demographics. In the case of the backup example, we had 9 backup admins total. And these are users who come to Rubrik on a nearly daily basis. And they are represented across different industries such as IT, manufacturing, education, as well as countries, including in the US and Europe. Next, I like to talk about the timing of the prompts. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. With a diary study, you can have users either record at set intervals of time, or it can be triggered by a certain action that they take or a thought that they have. What's important to consider here is when exactly is the best time for your users to actually sit down and write out their diary entry. So when I was thinking about the backup journey, in this case, our backup admins, they can be really busy at times, and sometimes they have to deal with emergencies at work. So I figured it would be best to have them record once a day at the end of their workday so that they would have enough time and capacity to actually fill this out. One tip here is try and automate this process as much as possible. Make it easier on yourself. So for example, in my case, I set up all the emails ahead of time so that they could be delivered automatically to the person's inbox by the end of the day. Next up, I want to talk about the medium in which you're having your users record their diary. Now, living in the 21st century, we have a lot at our hands. So besides text, there's also images, videos, audios, screenshots, tons of creative ways you can have your users record. And this is all dependent on your use case specifically. For me, since these were IT professionals, I chose Google Forms as this was a medium very familiar to them. I mainly focused on text, but also allowed the submission of photos, screenshots, videos, and audio. And towards the end of this diary study in particular, I allowed users to opt in to record a walkthrough of their day via their voice instead of writing. And for some of these users, it really resonated with them because they found that easier to do. Next up is one of the most important things that you'll want to consider, and it's the questions that you ask in your diary study. Not all participants are going to be prone to answering in a super detailed way, so you'll have to think about ways to really encourage them to reflect and provide answers that are much more above the surface level. In the example of our case study here, I started off broadly by asking them to describe their day and walk through. So this gave them the opportunity to stop, take a breath, take a step back, and kind of reflect upon what they had done that day. And following that, I then focused on more specific questions pertaining to each of those 5 themes that I discussed before. This is just a screenshot of a portion of the form from the diary study. And you'll see here that I not only asked what exactly they did or what they accessed, but how and why. And finally, the last one I want to talk about is communication methods. Because this study takes place over a long period of time, you're not going to just want to tell your participants, hey, go start recording your diary and don't talk to them until the end. You want to make sure that they're comfortable and feel heard throughout the process. So you'll want to determine a few different touch points. For me, I made sure to have an introductory call with each of the participants. In this case, I offered them a 1-pager that explained exactly what they would be expected to do, how they would do it, and what they can expect by the end. This is also a great opportunity to build rapport with each of the participants so that they knew who I was, since I was going to be the one reading all their diary entries. And of course, I wrapped everything up with a closing call to answer any other questions that they had and to provide them with the gift cards for their contribution to the study. Now that you know how to plan a diary study, let's say you're ready to kick one off. What can you expect once you actually start? Well, once you start letting them record their entries, you're going to start receiving an influx of documentations and data and information. So now what? The biggest tip I can give you here is to not wait to process that data. Start as soon as possible and be consistent. So the first tip here is to read those entries each day. Reviewing these on a daily basis will help you break that data down into more consumable chunks. So in my case, I had 9 participants, which means I would be reading 9 entries each day, versus if I waited until the end of the week, 45 entries. That really adds up. The next tip is to follow up and clarify as needed. Because you're reviewing these on a daily basis, that means that you're able to follow up in a timely manner if you need your participants to elaborate on anything. And finally, as you're reading, don't forget to tag your data. For me, it was a lot easier to organize everything by putting it all in one spreadsheet where each page represented a different day and contained all the entries from the participants. From there, I then labeled each entry with relevant actions, features, and motions they were feeling. Here's a screenshot from one part of that spreadsheet, and you'll see on the left-hand side there where I put in my tags. Now, the beauty of a diary study really revealed itself during this process because I could see how the people were feeling across time. And I'll give you one pertinent example here. So there were a few different users who were experiencing issues troubleshooting things inside Rubrik, and it became quickly clear that they were having difficulties finding a solution, and they would have to try things themselves, go talk to their teammates, and eventually sometimes reach out to Rubrik support. So one such user, he recorded a diary entry and started off saying, "Today, I started out my day by looking into a backup job that I kicked off yesterday. It appears to have stalled." And he then went on to describe all the different ways he tried to solve this problem and also the anxiety that he felt because his client kept asking him for updates. And he ended it by saying, "Overall, it was a very frustrating day where it felt like I was the glue in the middle, trying to push the situation to resolution, and the user wanted hourly updates to a high ticket." And this was one of the highlights of running a diary study, is where you can see those heightened emotions of the user. Great. Now you have a ton of data on your hands. What are you going to do with the data? And so this is where data synthesis comes in. And one of the techniques that we use in user research is something called affinity mapping. And this is essentially just using those tags that you had and grouping all your entries into different categories and forming associations. Another way you can think about it is by asking yourself some questions. For example, you might ask yourself, what goals are users focused on each day? Thinking from this perspective will help lead you to determine the motivations and jobs to be done for the users. Another question is, when are users expressing the most frustration? And this can help direct you to the major pain points. Another example, what features are users interacting with often and why? And this will lead you to the touch points. And finally, what other tools or processes do users employ? With the diary study, you not only find out how users are interacting with your product, but also what their lives are like in the bigger picture. And so you get a better sense of their environment. This is a snapshot from my synthesis process, and I did this in FigJam. It was a lot easier for me to put these down on sticky notes and be able to visually arrange them on screen. But it doesn't matter whether you choose to do this in a digital or physical sort of environment. The key thing here is to go through that process where you're grouping things into key focus areas. Great, now you have your findings, you have your insights, but you still need to share them out. Your findings are only as valuable as how they are going to be received and used. So here are 3 tips for how to share them. The first one is to take advantage of research visualization frameworks. And I'll go through and show you a couple of the ones that I use in a bit. The second tip here is to help think about, what can I do to make the user come alive? And I'll go back to that quote that I had about the multiple mediums, right? So not only using like user quotes, but taking videos or audios or anything else that they submitted to really convey and get that point across of who are our users to your audience. And remember, your stakeholders aren't there reading the diary entries themselves, so it's important for you to be the translator for the user here. And finally, remembering that you are presenting this to people who care about the business and product goals, make sure to convey the key areas of both friction and potential to tie your user insights back to the business opportunities and the original initiatives that you started off with. All right. And in this slide, I will be showing you the journey map. Perfect. So the journey map is an opportunity where you can show your audience what the users do, how they think, and when they experience friction. This is just one portion of the entire journey map that I created, but even from here, you can see there are high and low points for the user, and you can see the process that they take when they interact with our product. When I presented this at the All Hands, I also included some sound bites there to really get the user stories across. Next up, I want to talk more about the persona. So with a diary study, you can really understand a lot more about who your users are. And this helped me create a card where I could talk more to what the user's needs and pain points are. And here I was able to kind of name the backup admin as Ben the backup admin, put a face to the name as well, and really try and describe who our main users are. And lastly, I created one other asset. It was pretty unique to a diary study, and this is a day in the life. And this helps demonstrate a real situation that our users might go through. And this was a result of an amalgamation of all the different entries that I received. So those are a few different examples of assets that you can create to help share your findings in a visually compelling way. All right, and I should have one more slide for you here. Great, so now that you have wrapped up your diary study, it's not quite at an end. This is an opportunity for you to reflect on your experience. And some questions that you might ask yourself are the following. If I can get this to work, perfect. What do we now understand better about our users? Where are there gaps or areas we want to dive into more? What opportunity areas have we identified for improving the product? Now, after this talk, I hope you've all learned a bit more about that diary study methodology, and I hope you all have the confidence to go forth and run your own diary study. Thank you so much for your time today, for listening, and hope you join us for future talks by our product design team in the future.